Hello, loves. Welcome. Today I am with Kara Vogt. Kara is a maker with Wise Oak Soapery, and she is also a coach for makers, teaching Etsy sellers how to create video for their businesses. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kara. Can you tell us a little bit about your product-based business, the types of products you're creating, and how that works for you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I started Wise Oak about 3 years ago, I think it was. It's been so long, I'm starting to lose track. But I started it making soap for my son who had eczema and nothing else was working. The stuff that we would find on the shelf at the store, it just seemed to irritate it even more. And of course, when I started using it for him, making a long story short, I noticed that when I used it for him, that it was also helping my skin. So I started using it, and then we started telling people about it, and then they started using it. And, it just goes on from there. And then I expanded into balms and oh goodness, scrubs and shampoos and conditioners and all kinds of stuff. But it's all handmade. I use essential oils. I don't use anything synthetic in the ingredients. And that's
Yeah,
sorry.
and her products are amazing. I was literally just telling her how they helped my son with something this week. But you started 3 years, like, remind me, because I can't remember. I know you're like an OG with me, but was that basically when you were starting your business? Like when you found me?
Yeah, I had started in May 2019, and I came
Okay.
across you, I believe
Oh,
it was
June.
June.
Yeah.
June, yeah. So about a month.
Yeah. So the reason that I mean, I love Kara for all kinds of reasons, but I love Kara's story because Kara is actually a professional portrait photographer. And so when she came to me, she didn't necessarily have like the same struggles as, just makers coming into photography with knowing nothing. So can you kind of take us back to those first days when you were trying to take photos of your products and kind of even having a background in photography, kind of tell the listeners a little bit about what you were struggling with?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I was a portrait photographer. I worked in a studio as lead photographer. Um, I was the one that people would come to see, for lack of a better way to put it. So I was good at what I did.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it came to photographing my products, I found that I was really struggling. I couldn't get them to look right. There were shadows. There was all sorts of exposure issues, and it's sometimes it's almost better to just show you what they look like, but they were horrible. They were just bad. And I worked with it and kept trying to get it right. And actually, I was on, I think, YouTube looking for product photography, but I couldn't find what I needed. I kept coming across the ones that were like, I don't know, when I would see it, I would think of like commercials, like they were the dark, moody type product photography. I'm like, no, that's not what I want. I knew that I was, trying to make brighter, whiter photos, but I just couldn't find what I needed. And I ended up looking, I got so desperate, honestly, Christina, that I went to Facebook. And if you know me, you will know that I don't search for anything on
Yeah.
Facebook. Facebook is where I go to just like hang out. And on a whim, I typed in product photography and you came up, and I joined your group, and I was just like, holy crap. Like, this is exactly what I needed. And as I recall, it was right about the time that you had come out with your light box
Yeah.
that I thought was just absolutely amazing. And that's when I knew that that's where I was meant to be.
Yeah.
And from there, I became your student, and now I'm able to take the photos and have no problems. I know exactly what I need to look for. I know exactly what I need to do. One of my biggest struggles was the white on white, or I'm sorry, not the white on white, but on a white background. I struggled with that and struggled with that and struggled with that, even though in the studio, we actually had a white background set up to put people on.
Yeah.
And I could take a picture on there in 15 seconds, be done with it, no editing. But when it came to products, it was just like, this is not happening.
Well, and
But
that's,
now
yeah, your studio was probably set up for that. I mean,
it was. And honestly, like, I was trying to replicate that for a product. It doesn't work,
no.
obviously.
And that's
Um,
very important to mention because I've talked about that a little bit in our challenge this week is if you're out to YouTube to search, the problem is, or even if you're trying to do these collaborations or you're hiring a photographer who's not necessarily a product photographer, it's not the same. And the techniques that you use aren't the same. We talked a lot about front light being amazing for portrait photography and for video, but it's not amazing for product because it flattens and makes our products non-dimensional. So it's really important to understand that even though she had certain skills, and she's actually taught me things. That's the thing I love. Like, we've got Kara in the group. She's a professional photographer. I mentioned Liz. Liz is also a professional landscape photographer. So we're just in there, we're teaching each other stuff and, chatting. And Kara and I are like BFFs now, and we talk weekly, and, we collaborate and do things together. Like, we build relationships inside of this group, especially if you show up and, ask the questions and do the things. It's not just me in there helping you. There's a lot of experienced sellers who are willing to share, the information that they know, the advice that they have. And it's just a great, great community. So you took it to YouTube, took it to Facebook, you found me, you kind of answered all my questions without, look how beautiful you are. I'm like, hold on here. 3 was now you met me. Once you found me, what actions did you take to overcome those struggles? You built the light box. So the light box changed your world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even now, you still do a lot with natural light. You do a lot with just soft boxes in general, which we use soft boxes to build out the light box design. So what did you feel like the results were once you were able to kind of, have the answers you needed? Like, how did that make you feel?
Oh, man, I don't even know where to start, because it's like, before I would dread taking pictures. It was just like, oh, I have this new product, or I have this new variation, or whatever the case may be, new packaging or whatever. And I was like, I need to take pictures. Like, no, I don't feel like taking pictures. I don't feel like setting all the stuff up. I don't feel like struggling with it. I know I'm going to spend hours editing. And, it was just like everything would go through my mind, and I was not excited about it. Now I have a spot in the corner of my room that just, it's always ready to go. Like, I have the lights there. I have everything ready to go when I need a new photo. My biggest challenge is, how am I going to style it this time? So if am I going to do the white background? Do I want to do something different? Do I want to put a little plant in there? Whatever. That's the hardest part for me now. If I don't feel like being creative, I literally just put the product in the center, turn the lights on, take a picture, upload it, because I really don't have to edit. It's done. Now I look forward to it.
And that's kind of the fun part for me, though, is because I buy her products. So I play with them and I come up with different ideas. I just posted one the other day. If you want to go check out her shop, it's on my Instagram. But she was like, I am stealing this. And I'm like,
yeah, I totally steal it.
Because I created it for you. Right? Because I love taking your guys' products. And one of my favorite things is coming up with like scenes and settings, and especially ones that we're doing faux, like they're not real. Like, anybody can put a product into like a real space and kind of whatever. But I think for me, I love the challenge of not having the space that, would look great for product photography, and then just kind of using different elements and replicating that. And it's so much fun, because unless you see the BTS, the behind the scenes, you probably would have never even thought that, it's just, that we're using anything to stack a shelf, right? Like,
right.
The BTS isn't always pretty, but the end result, man.
You should have saw my BTS today. It was a mess, but yeah. So, but now, that's my favorite part now too, is coming up with the ideas and trying different things, because now I have the time to do that.
Yeah.
Before, it was just like struggling with the setup so much that I was so frustrated. It was like, I was not creative. It was just like,
I can only imagine that as a photographer, for you to like hit a point where you're like, shit, I cannot figure this out. Like, that has to be like kind of like a knock on your confidence when you're amazing at something and then you can't figure out this like one component. It's like, okay, what's wrong with me? Right. So I'm sure you had a lot of confidence too after.
Yeah, I did. I was blaming my camera. I was blaming all sorts of things. And it just came down to, I didn't have the proper setup for products. I mean, when you're going from photographing, full-size people to photographing a little 2.5 by 3.5 bar soap, all my products are around that size. Yeah, it was a challenge because I didn't have the proper setup for that. I didn't have the knowledge for that. And yeah, I was very frustrated to where I would dread it. I just didn't want to do it. I was like, nope,
Well, and
not
it's
happening.
interesting because it's important for you guys to realize this, because whether you know, decide to work with me, work with someone who knows product photography and product photography in a small scale, not necessarily commercial product photography where they're, you know, taking photos for these big brands, because it's just going to be different for you. But even the other day, actually, I think it was last night, we have this local, like, it's called Vegas Cafe and Smokehouse, but it's like this local restaurant, and they make the most amazing food. They're only open like 3 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week, but every week they have like a new special. So they have an ongoing menu, but they always create new specials every single week. And this special they had last night was this delicious steak salad. And they posted this picture and they're like, you know, sorry, it's blurry or whatever. And I just wanted to like write them and be like, oh my God, like, trade me meals, because it's expensive. Like, it's a very like bougie kind of restaurant. And I'm like, I'll trade you meals for photos. But then I was like talking to my husband about it, and he was like, you should. And I'm like, but honestly, I'm like, I'm not a food photographer, right? Like, I know how to style products. I know how to style, you know, people. I've done newborn, I've done, you know, family type photography, but I've never done food. And I'll tell you, that was like a knock on my confidence immediate, because I'm like, I don't know how to style food to make it look appealing, right? Because it's different. And that's just the
Mhm.
case with all, just because you can take pictures of people doesn't necessarily mean you can take pictures of products or food or however that looks.
Right.
They're all different and personalized. So
They are.
how did your results kind of creep into like other areas of your life? So when you started, we talked a little bit about, you know, kind of gaining confidence and getting back into it, but did you see an increase in sales? Did you see an increase in engagement? Like, how do you feel like having
Oh yeah.
photos helped you?
Yeah, at first it was, friends and family, that story, mom's liking all your stuff, your friends are liking all your stuff, but nobody else is liking your stuff. And then you notice that other people are starting to like your stuff. They're starting to follow you. They're purchasing, they're finding you on Google. To me, that was like, as much as I love Etsy, but to be found through Google
Yeah, that's like the
was just like, oh my gosh. Because that meant that I knew that it had to be like a photo
yeah.
that drew them in based on what they were searching for. And, you just get flooded with stuff on Google. So yeah, I saw an increase in sales. I saw an increase in following. It got to the point to where people would actually start giving me shout outs like on their accounts.
Mhm.
And I barely knew them, like they might have bought from me once, or something. Other soapers were purchasing from me. The other thing was that I just lost my train of thought. Um, oh, they were like, I always know when your post comes across my feed. I can always tell it's your picture. And that to me was like the best of anything, because I know that's like one of the goals
Mhm.
when you're photographing, is you want people to recognize your brand.
Yep.
And I knew at that moment that I had succeeded, at least on some level, with that they were able to just see the photo, not read any of the copy or anything, and just know immediately that it was mine.
And I love that you brought that up, because I was talking to Catherine before you, and after we had like stopped our whatever, we were chitter chatting, and she was kind of telling me the same thing, that, you know, initially when people started, her photos like popped, right? So when you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, you want your images to stop somebody in their tracks, and you want it to pop out at them, right? So the first time that happens, that's wonderful. And then if you have that cohesion, the next time you go to post, they see it. And yours, you know, I told Catherine the same thing. One, she sells super bold like purses and stuff, but like, you start to recognize brands, and the more you recognize them and the more they show up in your feed, the more interested you become in, you know, reading their captions or communicating with them. And it's just this like stair step effect that happens. So yeah, having cohesion, like having just your products stand out, is such a wonderful thing because it just engages people. And you might know this, but isn't it, what is it, like 7 occurrences like with your business before somebody, not, this isn't across the board, this isn't absolute, but industry like kind of standards, it's like 7 experiences with you before like you become, recognized, they want to engage.
Yeah, I think it's 7 to engage, and then it's like 15 to purchase. So, give or take a little bit, and then there's steps in between there.
And that's not
And
absolute,
honestly,
but yeah.
yeah. And honestly, like I don't have, I mean, people will reach out to me, but I would say more often than not, it goes from the noticing, the becoming familiar with me to the purchase. I very rarely, honestly, do I have anybody like reach out to me with questions. It's like once they feel comfortable with what they've seen and what I've said, just in my posts and my listings and stuff, it just goes to the purchase.
Okay, can you repeat that again? Because you know why? Because her product photos, they give all the information and they make people feel confident. They don't have to reach out to her and ask questions because she puts it out there on a platter for them.
Exactly. Which is great for the introvert in me.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for showing up today, by the way. Kara and I are, you actually probably wouldn't realize, but I'm kind of introverted in the sense of, and I say the same thing about Kara because we'll get to talking and we don't shut up, like we just talk. But after we both get off of a call with each other, we have to take a nap because we are so drained. Oh, goodness. Okay, so last thing, if you had one piece of advice for, say, somebody who was on the fence, because this is a big investment, right? It's a scary investment, especially, makers, if they've purchased courses in the past and they have not gotten to experience direct contact with the coach, or they feel like they don't have support, they can't get their questions answered. A lot of makers have been burned in the past when it comes to purchasing courses. So what is if somebody's on the fence, let me know, what would you say?
Where do I start? No, like honestly, and I've purchased other courses, whether they're, $20 courses or they're higher priced. And I have never gotten the amount of support that I have gotten with you. And that's the first thing. I know that anytime I have an issue, you're going to be right there and you're going to walk me through. You're going to show me how to do it. You're going to try to figure it out yourself. And then you're going to give me a screen capture of how you went through the process. So that's one thing. And know that as long as you put in the work, because your information is great, it's fantastic. And as long as people put in the work and they follow the steps, there's no way that they can't see results. In my view, I mean, everybody's results vary, but you know what I mean? Like, you're going to improve, and just over time practicing and going over and over and over again, you're going to improve. I don't know how many pictures I posted in the group, and and I was so proud of them. Like, I was like, oh, this is amazing. But, and I was like, oh, and then I was like, okay. And then I was like, and then I went back and did what you said. And then I'm like, holy crap. Like, there's things that you don't see when you're working on your own stuff. And you just have that keen eye, that detailed eye.
I'm very detailed.
Oh my gosh, you can pick out the tiniest little like smudge, which is good. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that made me be more detailed. Because I honestly got to where I was like, okay, before I show this to Christina, she's gonna find in this picture. And so now when I post, like, there might be one tiny little thing that I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah. I think that is hard sometimes though, because I am very blunt. I try to be, as kind as possible, but when you're working with a lot of people, sometimes like I get in there, I give you my truest, like, whatever opinion, honest, professional opinion, whatever, but it's truthful. And I very much believe that the only way that you can succeed is if I kind of break your stuff, down to the bare minimum. And while in the beginning, I know that's really hard for some makers because you're putting yourself out there, right? So you make a few changes and you post it into the group and you feel really good about those changes, and you should. But there's different stuff, like you can probably vouch for this, but maybe one time you posted a picture and I told you a couple things to fix, but then the next time you came back, you kind of did something a little different than you did the first time. You fixed the stuff, but you also did some other bad things that didn't get pointed out the first time. So then I had to like kind of correct those, and it just becomes that cycle. But I was actually talking to someone today and encouraging them because they're scared to get constructive criticism on their stuff. And I was just like, but if you ask for help and you ask for criticism, that is your chance, your opportunity to actually learn, and learning is growing, right? So then when you start to learn and you grow and you come back every single time and they're better, one day you're going to post a picture into the group and I'm going to like have these big heart eye emojis and I'll be like, I love it.
Absolutely. And that, yeah, there's no, to me, and don't get me wrong, like, I'm probably one of the most sensitive people that there are. Like, I don't take criticism well. I'm a perfectionist. I'm really working on not being a perfectionist. Like, okay is good enough in some aspects. But I really, because of my history in photography, I really strive for that, that perfection in photography. And as much as I was like, not mad, but just like, oh man, I didn't see that. Okay, I'm gonna go back and fix that, or like, what is she talking about today? But I would go try it, and then it's like, okay, now I see. And then it was like a few times of that, and it was just like, I can't wait to see what she points out to me today. So I can go fix it.
It becomes intriguing, right? Like,
yeah,
what's she gonna nitpick on today? Because I do nitpick, right, especially when you get to a certain point. So when you first are starting to post your pictures, I might do some very obvious ton of stuff. But when you start getting better, like you've got your light down, I will nitpick the hell out of your images to make them like perfect. Right. But it's super important to understand. This is why inside of the Maker's Method, I tell you to start with one product. Like, do not reshoot your entire images and then post them for a review. One product, take one picture, post it, let's fix it, let's go back, let's rinse, repeat. And then when we feel like, you feel more confident about moving forward, you pick, another
well, yeah, because that's the only way you're going to progress. If you are afraid to ask for the feedback, you're not going to progress, because you're going to be sitting in that scared space where you're just so petrified that you're afraid of what people are going to say, and you're not going to progress. You're not going to get anywhere because you're not going to know. And honestly, like, there's been times where I've gone, because I'm like a pack rat, right, with my pictures. So I don't tend to delete them, and any edit I tend to save along the way. And that's just, back from my portrait days. But I still do that now. And there are times where I go back to like the original and I look and I'm like, how did I even think that was ever good?
Yeah.
Like, it just wasn't, because I've progressed that much.
Let's go back to when I was 17 years old and took a bunch of senior pictures of all my friends. I wouldn't even share those with you guys right now. That's when that was our film days. Showing my age. I started with 35 millimeter.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. I used to photograph weddings, and it was always like, oh, I hope these turn out, because I only get one chance to do this. There's no do over. Thank God I never had to, worry, or, never had any problems. But yeah, it's not like now where you just like,
no, I mean, I'll tell you, when they came out with digital cameras, like at the time when I was, at the end of high school, early 20s, I was more of like a hobbyist. Like, I was taking courses. I was, doing a lot of stuff for free. I just loved photography. But you're right. It was so hard, because it's like, how do you had to like play with exposures, but you couldn't see what was happening. So you had to then go develop the film and try to remember what exposure like. It was like horrible trying to learn how to take photos, because you couldn't, like, on the camera, you can sit and change the exposure and see the results immediately. Like,
no, you didn't even have the EXIF. Like, you didn't have any of that. You just had your film that you popped in the camera, and I had notebooks.
Yeah.
Such and such session or whatever I was taking. Here was my film. Here was and it was even like different between brands, like Fujifilm and Kodak. Fuji had a cooler tone, Kodak had a warmer tone. And I would have to write that down. What film was I using? What settings did I use? What time of day? What? Goodness.
I can't. I honestly probably used auto a lot then. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I'm sure I played with manual to a point where I didn't really understand it, and obviously couldn't see the results, but I definitely got more into manual when digital came out. And actually, like, and then even cooler, they started coming out with digital cameras where you can see the changes while you're making them. Whereas before, when digital first came out, you had to actually capture the image to see the result. And now you can actually, like, as you're changing the aperture, it's actually changing on your screen, and it's super cool because you don't have to shoot an image to see it. Like, you know how many wasted, when I first started learning manual, how many wasted images I had on my like SD cards because I, couldn't see the results until after I shot the image. But as per usual, you and I are digressing.
Always.
Whatever else. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but thank you so much, Kara, for coming in and sharing your experience about working with me and working inside of the Maker's Method. We hope to see Kara is still super active in there. You do get, when you join the Maker's Method, you actually get an amazing course from her for free. What is it? Start
creating video for
on
Etsy.
Etsy. Creating video for Etsy. Sorry. I was saying start with learning video for Etsy. Creating video for Etsy. And that comes with a free group too. So you'll get to hang out with her more. We're awesome. We're there for you. So let's go. See you inside the Maker's Method.